Show. It's the Barbara Show. Coming your way with a smile today. Down the humorous path with a lark and a laugh. It's the Barbara Show. The Barbara Show. Welcome to Humorous Adventures with Barbara.
Well, welcome again to the Humorous Adventures with Barbara. Today's story is about my grandmother. Basically, this is what stems from, for me, to know unconditional love, to laugh and to enjoy life to the fullest. My grandmother was born in 1892, and she had two girls. It was in our family taught to us by my grandmother that we would always stick together. A love gush fest. Holidays, birthdays would always be in my aunt's basement because she had a bigger house with a big basement. So anytime there was a birthday, holiday event, it was at my aunt's house. And my father, who, if you watched one of my first shows, was a pioneer with a video camera. I'm talking 8mm silent film. But I'll tell you, I am so glad that he did that because I feel like when I watch these videos, it's my memory, and it's not my memory. It was too young. I was too young for it to be my memory, but it's my memory now. My father would have us put on skits, all the relatives and the kids. It'd be very fun. Now, I don't know how many of you watched this sitcom called The Beverly Hillbillies, but when I was a little girl, that was one of the shows. And they called their grandmother Granny. When I heard that, that just struck me. So from then on, my grandmother was known as Granny. And no matter how old I get out of our whole extended family, I'm the youngest, and I've been labeled the baby. I'm still called the baby. Love it. Now, because I was so much younger than my siblings and my cousins, my grandmother would play with me a lot, little raindrop games, board games, and I would win every time. At a certain point, when we were playing cards one time, my grandmother, she always would let me win. And I thought I was winning because I was such a great player. I was just loving it. And one time, my grandmother, playing a game with me, won by accident. I was livid. And, she was trying not to laugh, but it was just like she's just holding it in and laughing. I was devastated. And, my mother had come over. My grandmother was laughing so hard, that my mother thought she almost started choking. And my mother said, "What's the matter?" And finally, when my grandmother told her that, she won by accident, I was just livid. But in hindsight, it's hysterical. I would go everywhere with my grandmother when she was around the house, and when I would come home from school, she would be watching her soap operas, and I would get involved with all these characters. Now, a funny thing would be, though, she had one of those hearing aids. It was an old-fashioned one where under your clothes, there was a box with the plug here. And I don't know why this hearing aid would do it, but in the middle of watching a soap opera, all of a sudden this hearing aid would let off this high-pitched sound. So like this. But my grandmother, who's wearing the hearing aid, could not hear that noise. And I'd be, Granny, it's buzzing, shut that thing off. The other thing is, in the old days, they didn't have all the great things to take care of your teeth. So she clearly had dentures, and at night she would take her teeth out and put it in a glass beside the sink. So, getting up in the morning and seeing my grandmother's teeth was, kind of commonplace. Another thing I would do to her is, if she was wearing a sleeveless shirt and she lifted her arm, the skin that, kind of hangs when you get older, and I would just be doing this to her. If some kid did that to me, I'd go after him, but my grandmother just laughed. When we went shopping one time, she saw this dress, and actually how they marketed it was dress in a bag. The dress was made out of this nylon material, so you could roll it up. I'm not kidding. You roll it up in a big roll and you stick it in a plastic bag, and that's how the dress was sold. But literally, dress in a bag could be taken anywhere, and my grandmother loved these dresses. Now, during the holidays, and because we always had holidays at my aunt's house, she would always have this big spread of all these delicacies and nice things to eat. But my aunt and my grandmother and my mother knew that I loved to eat meatballs and hot dogs, which was very cheap food as compared to the spread that my aunt would make for all the relatives and friends. One time, my aunt forgot to make me my meatballs and hot dogs. So little Barbara, who was 5 years old, came up to the table like this. So the top of my head would be the top of the table. And since I was hungry and no one gave me my hot dogs and meatballs, I would peer over the table to see what I could eat. And I had this sliced meat that I could grab, but I hated fat. I hated fat even when I was born, I think. If I see fat, I have to peel it off. I'm not eating fat. So even as a little girl, I would take this piece of meat and take the fat off and then put it, started making a pile in the corner of my aunt's beautiful, preparation of the table. So after a while, people were saying, "What's that?" Because no one knew who was doing it. I'd slyly take a piece, peel off the fat, eat it, and then just put the fat in the same pile. Well, finally, my aunt or somebody saw the culprit, me. And instead of yelling at me, my grandmother, Granny, said to my aunt, "Hey, don't yell at her. You know that you were supposed to make meatballs and hot dogs for her." I always got my meatballs and hot dogs after that. The other thing is that my grandmother, she was just such a good sport. I don't know how to sew, but I took a sewing class, and I worked really hard on making the ultimate nightgown for my granny. Unfortunately, when it was all done, the top was a little lopsided once you put it on, but my grandmother wore that nightgown every day after I made it. She would not wear any other nightgown, and I just loved her for it. Also, she was the first one to get in a car with me when I got my driver's license. That's a pretty scary thing, but no, she was always there. She gave us a secret recipe that, you can cut potatoes and make these thin potatoes and you fry them. I tell you the recipe, but it's a secret. So my grandmother died when I was about 17, and I was really devastated. But the good news is I believe in quality of life, and as it happened, I think she died in her sleep very peacefully, and for that I am happy, because I do believe she really knew that she was loved. However, years later, some of my friends would say to me, "What are you going to get Barbara for her birthday?" So there happened to be this psychic that was well known, and my friends decided to chip in, and I'm going to go see this psychic. And I sat down and talked to her, and the way it worked with her is you ask a question, and she shut her eyes, and then she would tell the answer. So I asked the psychic, I said, I just felt that I was very close to my grandmother. And I just want to know that when I hear a buzz in my ear, does that mean she's thinking of me? So the psychic shuts her eyes for a while and then opens them. And she said, she can't believe you're asking that. Don't you know the sun rose and set on you as far as she's concerned? Well, I started crying, but it's a good cry. And I don't know, I just believe that the people that have been close to me in my life that have passed are still around me. And well, that's just my belief. You know, I say this affirmation pretty much every day or any time I can think of it, and which is true for me, and maybe different things can be for you. But I can truly say, from the love that came from my grandmother, my parents, you know, my grandparents, my parents, all my relatives, all my friends, I truly have unconditional love. I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm successful, I'm happy. And then I say I'm grateful. But as I say I'm grateful, I pinch myself, which makes me laugh. So all I want to say in closing, in dedication to my granny, is please carry on the legacy of light, laughter, and bring joy forward. Thank you again for joining me on the Humorous Adventures with Barbara.
It's the Barbara Show. It's the Barbara Show. Coming your way with a smile today. Down the humorous path with a lark and a laugh. It's the Barbara Show. The